searching for Jane fell off the log and Susie run backwards. A retrospective on childhood legends and the land that made me in Ashley County. Now, some people are going to say, I just can't listen to this stuff because you talk too slow. Well, my message to you is not everything should be in the flurry of a hurry. It's like Scott Weiland said about that music. Sometimes you got to put some space between your notes or your chords. So just slow down and take a little trip with me back to the 1970s and 80s and just remember a different time. It's never going back there, but it's good to draw upon some memories sometimes. I grew up on a farm in the folds of Longview Township, just a mile and a half southwest of Fountain Hill, Arkansas. Back then, the land was alive with movement. Cows shifting between pastures, horses grazing in fields, pigs rooting in the dirt, and chickens scratching about. The seasons dictated the rhythm of life. Think about that. People have been living by the seasons for a long time, but we don't necessarily live there anymore, most of us. But then it was, and I learned early on that everything had its time and place. Watermelons were grown in one part, tomatoes in another. The county Extension office made sure the fields were fertilized just right. Run their tests, get the right kind of fertilizer, even things out. And speak of even in the winter, when the world seemed to slow to a halt, we planted turnips to keep the cows fed. Always looking ahead to the next cycle of growth and harvest. I lived next door to my grandparents in a brick house, set high on the land. A slough ran between our house and my uncle's place to the north and behind us, separating pastures. A winding, watery divide the slough was that never reached our homes, but yet they shaped the lay of the land. These streams, these waters, these ditches that overflowed and ran into a basin. Pastures stretched out in layers, garden, slough, fence line, then more pastures until you reached Fountain Creek. That creek was the heart of the land, the marker where the farm ended, or so I thought as a child. But the farm didn't stop there. That's just what you could see from the house. We had pastures and fields on both sides of Fountain Creek. Crossing it wasn't just something we did. It was a part of farm life, a necessity. There were fords, natural crossings worn by years of use, places where tractors and trucks eased their way across. On the other side, more pastures stretched into the distance. More fields waited to be planted or harvested. The creek wasn't the dividing line. It was a passage to a mysterious place in my mind. And it was down at that creek where legends lived in my mind. My grandfather, born in 1914, was a man of the land and a teller of tales. Sitting on the porch or riding along in his Massey Ferguson tractor, he'd weave stories about Jane fell off the log and Susie run backwards. Two mysterious figures who supposedly lived down by the water. They lived down in the creek basin. Actually, he'd say, they lived down in the creek, he'd say. And I, young and full of belief and imagination, imagined them lurking just beyond my line of sight, behind that line of trees. I didn't know it was called Fountain Creek back then. To me, it was simply the creek. a shadowy, mysterious place where anything was possible. I remember the first time I thought I found Jane. I was riding tractor with my grandfather, bouncing on the old paths, and when we passed by a fallen tree that stretched across the creek, a walk log, crossing log, that's what we called it, a natural bridge for crossing when the water was too high. My young mind made the connection instantly. Jane fell off the log. This must be where she got her name. Maybe this was the very log she fell from. And Susie Runbackwards, well, she was harder to pin down. I never saw her, but I could imagine her. Wild hair, dressed in some kind of a primitive garb, I don't know, like a caveman or a Neanderthal, darting backward through the woods or the pastures. It's like something out of time, a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. I don't know. My grandfather never explained who they really were or why they did what they did. He just said they were there. It got me to thinking, because then they were a mystery. And that was their point, the mystery. What was out there? Plus, it would keep me from back there, too. You don't go roaming off back there, man. This here was on Fountain Creek. There was big cats that roamed up and down this thing. People say, there ain't no big cats around here. Well, I'm going to tell you there is. I've seen them. But I've spent years searching for Jane Fell Off the Log and Susie Runbackwards. And I've never found them. Peering through trees, listening for footsteps in the underbrush, part of me wanted so badly for them to be real. Much like those investigators in the X-Files years later. I wanted to believe. But no matter how many times I crossed the creek or walked the fields, I never found them. As I got older, the farm became a place of work as much as wonder. I learned to drive the Massey Ferguson, hauling tomatoes to the finishing barn where farmhands sorted and packed them for the sale barn. Hauled hay, rescued calves in the deep water. The smell of diesel and Prince Albert pipe. Mixed in with that buckshot mud, clung to my grandfather's clothes in the air, mingling with the thickness of the Arkansas air. Even today, the scent of either one sends me back instantly, riding with him, my small hands gripping the side of the tractor, the steady hum of the engine beneath me, the smell of that buckshot mud, of that burned diesel, of that Prince Albert in a pipe. The land stretched endlessly back then. Crossing Fountain Creek was an adventure and a chore in the spring. Depending on the time of day, we had all kinds of things arise. We had pastures, fields, and woods on both sides, and working them meant fording the creek. Sometimes you had to do carefully. Sometimes with a determined push through the water. There's a rock bottom down there somewhere. But looking back, it all felt like a kingdom, a vast, unchanging kingdom. But nothing stays the same. That once busy place that was filled with people and activity and animals, and the Pennington farm doesn't exist anymore. Not in the way it once did. Time did what it does. It divided the land, passed it down, broke it into pieces, and spread it among those who inherited it. My grandfather's long gone. More than 30 years now. The farm is no longer mine to return to, and yet the stories remain. I never saw Jane Fell Off the Log or Susie Runbackwards, but I can still see them in my mind, as clear as the past itself. They belong to the land, woven into the fabric of my childhood. Maybe they were never there, maybe they were never real, or maybe they were just echoes of something older, passed down in whispers. I don't go back to that place anymore and have no plans to. But on quiet days when the air smells right, it hits me. I do just that. I find myself there anyway, on the back of that tractor, watching the trees for movement, waiting for Jane and Susie to appear. Still looking and still believing. And Jane fell off the log and Susie run backwards. In Longview Township, Ashley County, Arkansas.